Neither the theologians of the West nor their scientist brethren have explained this aspect of the case, and we must confess this as the only one weak point in modern Christianity, which their best defenders have not been able to strengthen. It will not require much thought to see that this story of man's first disobedience, and of his tasting the fruit of that forbidden tree, is nothing more than the doctrine of karma, as told by all the Indian schools of philosophy, including the Buddhists. The knowledge of good and evil is good and bad karma, and the fruits thereof are the pleasures and pains derived from such acts. There is no harm in performing good and bad acts, but these acts should not be performed for the sake of the fruits, out of selfish desire or dislike. And the moment these are performed with such desire, the thirst, trishna, tana, after such enjoyment increases, and the bonds of worldly existence are more and more made fast. The fruits of both are bad, and are compared to gold and iron fetters, and Saint Tiruvallvar calls them the two kinds of karma, darkness covered. It is significant how in the Indian philosophic schools the phrase meaning eating the fruits of karma is the commonest expression and one which exactly corresponds to the eating of the forbidden fruit of good and evil in the biblical accounts. More than this, the tree of good and evil fruits, one tree out of which both fruits are produced, is a common figure in the Upanishads and in the Tamil Siddhanta works. The following passages in Mundaka Upanishad 3, 1-4, which are repeated in the Katha and Svetaspatra Upanishads, are derived from the Rig Veda, explain the whole fully. Two birds, inseparable friends, cling to the same tree. One of them eats the sweet fruit, and the other looks on without eating. On the same tree, man, Anisa, sits grieving, immersed by his own impotence. But when he sees the other Lord, Isa, contented, and knows his glory, then his grief passes away. When the seer sees the brilliant Maker and Lord of the world, and himself as in the womb of God, then he is wise, and shaking off good and evil, he reaches the highest oneness, free from passions. Life sure is he who flames through all creation. The wise man knowing him reaches of naught else. He sports in God, and God finds his delight. Yet he doth acts perform, truthfulness, penance, meditation, etc. Best of God's universe he. This God is to be reached by truth alone, and meditation, by knowledge pure and constant discipline. He is in body's midst, made all of light, translucent, whom practiced men, sins washed away, behold. That heavenly bright of thought transcending nature shines out both vast and rarer than the rare, far farther than the far, here close at hand, that too, just here in all that see nestling within the heart. By eye he is not grasped, nor yet by speech, nor by the other powers, nor by mere meditation, or even holy deeds. By wisdom calm, in essence pure, then not till then does one in ecstasy him free from parts behold. The second mantra is thus commented on by Sri Kantracharya, see Siddhanta Dipika, Volume 2, page 74. The traditional interpretation of this passage is given as follows. The jiva, bound by the shackles of beginningless karma, having entered into many a body made of maya, physical matter, each suited to the enjoying of a particular fruit, is subjected to a lot of incurable misery, and unable to ward it off on account of his impotence, he does not know what to do and grieves. He is thus immersed in the ocean of grief, caused by his great delusion. When, however, by the Lord's grace, he intuitively sees him, who as the impeller dwells within himself, who is gracious to all, who is ever associated with Uma, love and light, then he attains to the unsurpassed greatness of the Lord, free from all grief. Therefore, though Shiva, who is independent and who has been free from samsara, from time without beginning, is in contact with the body, he is not subject to its evils, as the jiva is. Wherefore it is that Jiva and Parameshvara are said to be in the cave of the heart. Saint Tirumular has the following stanza. There is a fruit maturing from flowers of vanity. One bird partakes of it, and another does not. If aimed with an arrow and driven away, sure one can reach the golden seat of Shiva. Saint Manikavachakar calls the tree exactly in the following beautiful passage. Meanwhile the heavenly mighty stream rises and rushes, crowned with bubbles of delight, eddies around, dashes against the bank of our embodiment, and twofold deeds of ours, growing from age to age, those mighty trees, roots up and bears away. It rushes through the cleft of the high hills, is imprisoned in the encircling lake, where grow the expanded fragrant flowers, in tank where rises smoke of the aguil, where beetles hum, and as it swells with ever-rising joy, the ploughman devotees in the field of worship, sow in rich abundance seed of love. Hail, cloud-like God, hard is this universe to reach. From Dr. Pope's translation. And Saint Patinatar has a much more elaborate passage in regard to the uprooting of this poisonous mango tree in Tiruvidai Marudur Momanikovi. The tree of knowledge of good and evil is the karmic life of the individual, made up of the accumulated acts performed by him, remaining in a perfect and unchangeable chain of causes and effects, following the man close like his shadow, as distinguished from the tree of life which is the light in him. It is this karmic existence, this tree of shadow, which the Buddhists postulated, and not anything like the tree of life, or the true soul postulated by the theistic Hindu schools, and they recognize nothing higher than this impermanent, though continuous, as a stream, karmic life. To them all existence seemed only as sorrow and evil, and complete cessation or annihilation of this karmic existence, by the attainment of mere knowledge, constituted their highest end. To them there was no joy in life, and no means of attaining to such joy, as they would not recognize the all-loving powers of the Supreme Lord, who could grant them such joy out of his immeasurable grace. The Siddhanta no doubt postulated with the Buddhist that his body, birth and death, must cease, his feelings must cease, his life must cease, his understanding must cease, and that his egoism must cease. But how and whereby could this cessation be brought about? The means are set forth succinctly in the 10th and 11th sutras of Shivajnana Bodham. As the Lord becomes one with the soul in its human condition, so let the soul become one with him, and perceive all its actions to be his, then will it lose all its mala, maya, and karma. As the soul enables the eye to see and itself sees, so Hara enables the soul to know and itself knows, and this Advaita knowledge and undying love will unite it to his feet. They are becoming one with God, and dedicating one's acts to God, and unceasing love and devotion to Him. By such dedication, one brings himself in harmony with the divine law, and loses his pride of self-knowledge, and his own ignorance and karma cease to operate, the man's whole being becoming beauteous by the flood of his grace. As clearly distinguished from the Buddhist ethics and psychology, the Siddhanti believes that his salvation cannot be secured except by such self-renunciation and love of the Supreme. He is the one not comprehended by the gods and the wise. He is the life of all life. He is the supreme panacea for all the ills of the flesh, and obeying his law, no one knows death or birth. He is the shining light of our dark existence. He is the one joy, but not born of life, not born of prakriti guna, or the world and the transitory, and partaking of this joy, our highest desires are completely fulfilled. Unlike the joys of this world, which ever create a flaming desire, a thirst after them, more and more like the unquenchable thirst of the confirmed drunkard. This supreme and resistless joy, as shown in our stanzas of the House of God, fill our hearts, like the flood brooking not its banks, when in all humility and love our body and heart melt in his service. The contrast between the transient world's joy and the joy that transcends all states without end is well brought out in the following stanza by the same Saint Manikavachakar. Taste not the flower-born honey drop tiny as a millet seed. Sing thou of him who showers honey of bliss, so as to melt one's very marrow bones, while thinking, seeing, and speaking aye and ever. When this joy fills him, then does he sport in God, delight in God, as the Mundaka says. Then does he love God, delight in God, revel in God, and rejoice in God, as the Chandogya puts it. In this condition of Swaraj, when he can exclaim, I am the glorious of the glorious, neither pain nor pleasures of this world, nor the fruits of the forbidden tree, can touch or attract him, though he desist not from doing his duty, such as truthfulness, meditation, tapas, etc. And in this condition, even if he moves about there, laughing or eating, playing or rejoicing in his mind, be it with women, carriages, or relatives, Chandogya Upanishad 8.12.3, these acts will not affect him as fire cannot burn a man who is practiced in Agnistumba. See the principle stated in Shivajanana Siddhyar 10.5 and 6. Compare this with the Christian aspiration to divine joy. If to any the tumult of the flesh were hushed, hushed the images of the earth, and water, and air, hushed also the ruler of heaven, yea, the very soul be hushed to herself, and by not thinking on self-surmount, self-hushed all dreams and imaginary revelation, every tongue and every sign, and whatsoever exists only in transition, since if we could hear all these say, we made not to ourselves, but he made us that abideth forever. If then having uttered this, they too should be hushed, having roused our ears to him who made them, and he alone speak not by them, but by himself, that we may hear his word, not through any tongue of flesh, nor angel's voice, nor sound of thunder, nor in the dark riddle of a similitude, but might hear whom in these things we love, might hear his very self without these, as we too now stained ourselves and in swift thought touched on the eternal wisdom which abideth over all. Could this be continued on, and other visions of far unlike be withdrawn, and this one ravish and absorb, and wrap up its beholder, and thine inward joys, so that life might be forever like that one moment of understanding, which we now sighed after, we were not this, enter in my master's joy. St. Augustine's Confessions, Book 9. While earth and air, water and sky and fire may change their nature, he changes and wearies not. In him I lost my body and sense, my life and mind. I lost myself. I sing Telenam. Ye fools that speak of the unspeakable, can ye find the limits of the limitless one? When, as the waveless sea, one gains clearness, to him will appear the Lord with braided hair. Compare also, when deeds perished, and with it wealth, when flesh perished, and with it life, when mind perished, and its cause Akash, when my eye perished, I did not know. O my Lord of Kanchi, when the elements, senses, and sensations, the differing gunas and desires, and sense of time and space, when all these are lost in the blissful vision, then am I freed from all evil and rest in peace. The original fall was brought about by disobeying God's law, by opposing our will to his will, and the only way of salvation consists in establishing the harmony of will between his and ours, and completely subordinating our will to his own, and allow his will to be done as it is in heaven. When we were first created, we were just like children, fresh and innocent, fully trusting and depending on our loving parents, without caring for the morrow, fully obeying their dictates, and never asserting ourselves nor becoming self-willed. But the child preserves this condition only for a short time. It would not abide by the loving words of wisdom and warning given to it, would know for itself, and slowly its desire and self-will are developed, and in its ignorance and conceit it accumulates the load of karma. And unless we become again like children, abiding in trust and faith completely on our beloved Father, we cannot get rid of this sin and sorrow. And unless we become born again, we cannot see the kingdom of heaven, as declared by the same Jesus Christ, whom the world thought he was beside himself, i.e. mad. And our Saint Tayamanavar likens the nature of the saintly to the babies and lunatics and men possessed. Karma simply means an act, and this act may give pleasure or pain, and if it gives pleasure, it is called good, and if it produces pain, it is called evil. Every good act is right, and every evil act is wrong. or punyam or papam, virtue or sin. Shivajnana Siddhyar defines punyam and papam as doing good to all sentient creatures and doing evil to all creatures in the largest and broadest sense of the term, in the same way as any modern utilitarian philosopher would define these terms, and we have no doubt that the definition is quite correct from any point of view. When we interpose conscience in the middle as a judge of good and evil, right and wrong, it is seen how varying the consciences of men are, and so we must necessarily seek a higher authority or test. Karma therefore signifies acts or series of acts, or the aggregate of human experience, acting and reacting on each other, and law of karma means the invariable order or niyati, which results, pain or pleasure attaches itself to a doer in accordance with the kind of acts performed by him, in accordance with the maxim, he who sows must reap accordingly. One result of this law is that the respective fruits have to be enjoyed in a suitable body, and this body is determined by the karma performed by each. See Shivajnana Bodham 2, A.B. And if his previous karma is good, he will get a good body, and if it is bad, he will get a bad body. And this accounts for the myriads of physical bodies in every stage of development, to the highest, from that of the amoeba to that of a Christ or Manakavachakar, possessed of every varying mental and spiritual characteristics. The more good a man performs, the better and more developed body does he get, with the accompanying development of mind and heart, and the result of this privilege is that he is enabled to get a purer and purer body, which, the more it becomes pure, will reflect the light and glory of God, so that when man reaches his physical and mental perfection, he reaches the spiritual perfection of complete merger in the supreme light, and of all bodies, the human body is the one in which a man can work out his salvation, and therefore is he enjoined to take time by the forelock and do good while this body lasts, if not to secure salvation in this birth, at least to secure a better body in which he can carry on the good work. Among births numberless, that of man is rare, rare indeed. When this birth is lost, what will happen I know not. Hence, O thou supreme of supreme, the good desiring to attain Shiva Jnana, ever perform good deeds and tapas and make gifts. And so this doctrine of karma, instead of leading to quietism and indifference, inculcates a life of active beneficence, desiring the welfare of all, and furnishes as good and sure a basis for perfect ethical conduct as any other system in the world. But even when doing good works, he is not to have any regard for the result. He is to do it without tasting the fruits thereof, as this tends to bind him to the world, still by producing the physical body, and will not affect his final release from this body. And after performing evil and good, he attains to becoming balanced in good and evil, pain and pleasure. This does not mean that he should so perform actions that all his good actions will weigh as much as his bad actions, or doing as much punyam as papam, but it is attaining to a condition of viewing deeds either good or bad, without either liking or disliking. In such a condition, man is not impelled or attracted by anything which will give him pleasure. He will not be deterred simply because it will cause him pain. Such objects of desire in the world are wealth, health, and gratification, and we hate all those acts which will produce the opposite results. To such a person, wealth and poverty, food and poison, praise and blame will be equally welcome, and one looks on all these as one looks on dust or chaff, without desire or aversion. It is when a man attains to this condition that he is led in pursuit of the highest ideals, to do the greatest acts of heroism and the most magnanimous acts of self-sacrifice, and suffer the greatest martyrdom. The story of the churning of the ocean is full of this meaning. The gods who were pained at their poverty and desired wealth came to reap the fire of the poison, which arose as a result of their own self-seeking, and the Supreme Being who appeared there, not for the sake of any reward, but for the sole purpose of saving the distressed gods, was not affected by the poison which he swallowed, so that when God willed to create this earth and the heavens, It was not the result of a mere whim or play. It was not for his own improvement or benefit. It was not for his self-glorification or self-realization. But he willed out of his infinite love and mercy towards the innumerable souls who were rotting in their bondage, enshrouded in anavamala, without self-knowledge and self-action, that they be awakened out of their kevala condition and move into the cycle of evolution, births, and deaths, whereby alone they can effect their salvation. Once helped on to do this by being given bodies, faculties, etc., out of matter, they begin to accumulate karma, which has to be eaten fully before the indifference to pain and pleasure can be gained. In the process of eating the bitter fruits and gaining balance, one gathers experience and wisdom and the knowledge of truth. And unless this truth be gained, the soul's salvation is a mere myth and nothing more. The Four Paths. Religion, theoretical and practical. A good deal of attention has been paid of late to the theoretical aspects of our Hindu religion, and most people are familiar with the various systems of Hindu philosophy, of the Dvaita, Vishishtadvaita, and Advaita aspects in particular. And in such a study, one is likely to lose sight of the practical aspect of the religion, and it is so to this aspect I wish today to draw your particular attention. Difficulties in understanding Hindu religion. To the ordinary foreigner, Hinduism appears as a fantastic combination of the grossest superstitions and the most dreamy speculations. Even the sympathetic student of our religion, though he is prepared to admire and appreciate particular aspects of our philosophy, looks down with pity on our so-called errors. And one Christian friend put to me whether in Hinduism we have any real and practical religion. Of course, to the onlooker, the contrast between temple worship and its attendant festivals, and the austerer practices of the sannyasins, the ablutions and puja of pious people, and the tattvamasi and ahambrahmasi meditations of others, cannot but be bewildering. Even some of us are apt to look upon so much labor and money spent on temples and in temple worship as so much waste, or we are prepared to relegate these practices to the illiterate lower orders, as we are pleased to call them. Can all these various practices have any real meaning and purpose, or can they not? Can all these be reduced to certain definite principles or not? These are the questions which I propose to discuss in this paper. Different paths and upasanas. Of course, we have read and heard people talk about karma marga, bhakti marga, and yoga and jnana margas, as though there is little or no bhakti, or bhakti is not wanted in other margas, as though there are no actions or duties attached to the others, or all those who do not follow the jnana marga are only ignorant people. Does men smearing themselves with ashes and namams, repeating God's names, constitute bhakti? Does not the relieving of the poor and infirm and the sick constitute part of one's religious duties? Is it the highest duty of the yogi and jnani that he considers himself superior to others, and thinks that he will be polluted by the mere touch of others, and that he has achieved a great thing if he has injured none? And then we have heard of different upasanas and vidyas, sadilya, dahara, sakala, and nishkala, and saguna, and nirguna, and there are people who would advocate the saguna against the nirguna, and the nirguna against the saguna. To begin a statement of my views, Hindus hold as an axiom that no study is of any benefit unless it can lead one to the worship of the Supreme One. And we cannot be rid of the ills that the flesh is heir to, and across the sea of births and deaths, and attain to everlasting joy, unless we reach the feet of the Supreme Lord. To get rid of our ills and to attain his joy is our goal, the Kural. That this human birth is given to us to work out our salvation, and in this mundane plane, is admitted by all religions, Christianity included. How then can we attain to this end? This is the consideration of the practical religion, and our systematic treatises devote considerable space to the treatment of this question. This is the chapter on sadhana in the Vedanta Sutras and in the Shivajnana Bodham. As a necessary prelude to this, the nature of the deity and of the soul has to be discussed. Nature of God. According to the greatest sage of our Tamil land, Saint Tiruvallur, He is our supreme Lord and Master, the author of our being and regeneration. He is the pure intelligence and the transcendent one, and he is without likes and dislikes, dwells in our heart, and he is the ocean of love and mercy. The Upanishads speak of him as the highest great Lord of lords, God of gods, King of kings, the highest abode, as God, the Lord of the world, the adorable. He is the one God hidden in all beings, all-pervading, the Antaratma of all beings, watching over all works, dwelling in all beings, the witness, the perceiver, the only one, the Nirguna being. His high power, Shakti, is revealed as manifold, as inherent, acting as force and knowledge. He is Shiva, the happy and blissful. He brings good and removes all evil, the Lord of bliss, as dwelling within the Atma, the immortal, the support of all. No one has grasped him above or across or in the middle. His form cannot be seen. No one perceives him with the eye. That God, the maker of all things, the Paramatma, always dwelling in the heart of man, is perceived by the heart, the soul, the mind. They who know it become immortal. Those who through heart and mind know him thus abiding in the heart become immortal. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma Ananda Rupam Amritam Yadvibhuti Shantam Shivam Advaitam. He is the Sat, Chit, and Anand. In the Gita also he is spoken of as the Lord of Lords, Ishvara and Maheshvara, the spectator and permitter, supporter and enjoyer, the Paramatman, the supporter of elements, as devourer and causer. It is the light of lights and is said to be beyond tamas, wisdom knowable, wisdom gainable, centered in every heart. In the Advaita Siddhanta Shastras, he is called one with his Shakti, the Shiva Sat, one with the world and different and both, the light transcendent, the Lord who guides souls innumerable in obedience to his will, ajna, and each one's karma. The Nirmala being untouched by the defects of his creatures, supreme he stands, secondless, pervading all. Shiva is neither a rupi nor an arupi. He is neither chit nor achit. He does not create nor sustain nor perform other functions. He was never a yogi nor a bogi. Though present in and pervading all these inseparably, yet he is of a nature different from all these. The form of this Shakti is pure intelligence. If asked whether supreme will and power are also found in this supreme intelligence, yes. Wherever there is intelligence, there is will and power. As such, the power and will be manifested also by the supreme Chit Shakti. Hara has grace for his Shakti. Except as this supreme love and grace, there is no Shiva. Without Shiva, there is no Shakti. Isha removes the hate of the souls with his love and grants them bliss, just as the sun dispels the darkness, shrouding the eyes with his light. This supreme statement was reached in the famous lines of the great Tirumular. God is love, and that great agnostic teacher of science who died a sincere believer in God had stated truly, what has all the science or all the philosophy of the world done for the thought of mankind, to be compared with the one doctrine, God is love? God is as such all knowledge and all love. Nature of the soul. To talk of the means to attain to this great goal will be futile if we don't understand the nature of man. From the statements in the first chapter of the Choral, it may be deduced that man is ignorant and subject to births and deaths, and has likes and dislikes, and does sin and suffer, and he could not be compared to God in any way. The following texts bring out the distinction quite plainly enough. The knowing one, God, and the non-knowing, soul, are two, both unborn. One is Lord, the other non-Lord, Anisha. Patim vivasyat meshwaram, Lord of the soul, Shasvatam Shiva Machutam. He who dwells in the soul and within the soul, whom the soul does not know, whose body the soul is, who rules the soul within, he is thy soul, the ruler within, the immortal. But the soul paramount is another, who is proclaimed as the Paramatma, who, the infinite king, penetrates all the three worlds and sustains them. Since I do surpass the Kshara and even do excel the Akshara, I am reputed the Purushottama, a difficulty in reaching the goal. And here we are met by statements that God is unknowable and imperceptible to our senses. He is past all thought and speech. And yet the Upanishads say that when men should roll up the sky like a hide, then only without knowing Shiva there could be an end of pain. And Saint Arulnandi Shivacharya states the difficulty thus: if God is unknowable, then there can be no benefit from him. He can never pervade us, neither can we unite with him in moksha. He cannot perform the panchakrityas for our benefit. His existence will be like that of the flowers of the sky and of the rope formed of the hairs of the tortoise. And yet it must stand to reason that we cannot possibly know him if his nature is as we have described above. The moment we assert that we can know him, we assert that he becomes an object of our cognition, and as all psychologists, Hindu and European, are agreed, all objects of cognition are what is called achit or asat, or matter. Here is Saint Arulnandi's statement: if you ask whether God is an object of knowledge or not, then know, if he is an object of knowledge, he will become achit and asat. All objects of cognition are achit. All objects of cognition come into being and are destroyed, being bound by time. They divide themselves into the worlds, bodies, and organs, being bound by space and enjoyments. They are identified at one time by the intelligence as itself, bandha, and at another time, in moksha, are seen as separate, and they are all products of maya. Hence all such are achit, or non-intelligent, or asat, other than sat. As God is spoken of as the inner ruler and soul of soul, whose body the soul is, the knowing soul is itself in the position of object to the true subject, God, and the thinking mind cannot itself think thought, much less can the object perceive or think the subject. And if he cannot be known, he must be a non-entity, argues Saint Arulnandi. And this exactly is the position which Paul Carew takes in his pamphlet on the idea of God. His argument is exactly that of Saint Arulnandi, that if God is knowable, he can only be known as an object, as matter, which will be absurd. But Paul Carew would, however, retain God as an idea, or ideal, an abstract thing, as redness or whiteness, a beautiful fantasy which will be useful. But as against this view, it is positively asserted by Saint Arulnandi that he is not a non-entity, and that he is sat and chit. As he is chit, he is not knowable, and yet he is a positive fact. How is then this psychological difficulty to be got over? The first possibility of overcoming the difficulty. In the first place, it will be futile to think of knowing him as different from ourselves as an object. Says Saint Arulnandi, as God is not different from the soul, as he is in the soul, as he is the thinker of all the soul's thoughts, as in him there is no distinction of I and mine, God cannot be perceived by the soul's intelligence as different. God is not different from you either as he is inseparably associated with you and transcends all discriminating intelligence, as he is ever the inside of the soul. The soul can be said to be Shivam. The first possibility of our becoming him will lie, therefore, in the fact that we are inseparably associated with him, and must think of ourselves as one with him. We must not create distinctions between ourselves and himself, interpose our will and thought, the feelings of I and mine. Then only will our will and thought come into rapport with him. O mind, was it not for me that God came under the banyan tree as silent teacher, and with dumb show of hand cured me of acts called my acts, and placed me in the blissful ocean of his grace? By grace behold all things, he said, not understanding, by my intelligence I beheld differentiating. I saw darkness, I saw not even me the seer. What is this, sister? Of me and thee think not in thy heart as two, stand undifferentiating. This one word, when he uttered, how can I tell, dear, the bliss that grew straightway from that word? From Saint Tayamanavara's Revel in Bliss, translated by P. Arunachalam, Esquire, M.A. of Colombo. The second possibility. The second possibility lies in the fact that God is not knowledge alone. If he was so, we cannot know him for certain. But as we have stated above, he is also all love. It is in this supreme fact that our salvation is based. This love in us surrounds us on all sides, above, below, and all about us. His love to us passes that of the mother, says Saint Manikavachagar. No selfish want prompts his love. His love was ever with us from our first beginning to the very end. Who knows the power of this Arul by which omnipresence is secured? who understands that this love transmuted herself into tasteful ambrosia, who thinks that this love permeates subtly the five great operations, Panchakritya, who knows that this love has eyes on all sides, is omniscient. Born in love, bred up in love, changing and resting in love, fed in the supreme ambrosia of love, the Nandi entered me as love. The mother's love will not suffer, even if the child misbehaves and does not deserve it. If we will therefore return his love, then our salvation is secured. With undying love enters the feet of Hara. Saint Tirumolar sums up these foregoing facts in a beautiful verse. Becoming one without being one nor two, becoming freed of Samaya Nirakara, ascending by the grace of our loving Mother, and becoming Shivam is Siddhanta Siddhi, love the greatest thing in the world. Now let us realize to ourselves how it is that to know him and become one with him, we must love him. Let us take our human relations. Is it by birth encased, wealth and possessions, learning and knowledge, that one is brought nearer to another? Are not all these barriers dividing one from another? By all these means one regards himself as raised above all other less favored individuals. It is learning that puffeth up a man. The I-ness and mine-ness become more and more developed in these men. So these means can never lead one nearer to another. Then what other means have we? It is love, love in all its gradations from pity upwards. This is the greatest thing in the world, as Professor Drummond truly said. It is the ideal of both theistic and atheistic systems of the world. Love is the basis of all human society, the rock on which it is built. This will appear so from the mere heads of the chapters in the sacred Quran. It is the one thing which binds man to man, the parent to the child, friend to friend, and the woman to the husband. When this prevails, the distinctions created by birth, possessions, and learning all cease. It is this which impels the servant to engage in his master's service, the mother to sacrifice herself to the child, the friend to give his life for his friend, the lover to forget himself in the loved. All the noblest acts of heroism, philanthropy, and martyrdom arise from this one source. It is this love which, as we have seen, gives rise to the other great fact in being, namely sacrifice. Even naturalists have discovered the connection of these two facts, love and sacrifice, even in the case of lower animals. And should not this law hold good in the higher realm than the animal and social? And it is to lead to this end we have all along been trying. Knowledge necessary. And in this place the importance of knowledge cannot be ignored. One has to enter a railway platform and watch one of the ever-recurring scenes. The compartments are crowded more or less. Fresh passengers try to rush into it. The persons, impelled of course by their own comfort, resist the intrusion. Actual fights ensue. Some of them try to get in somehow. They stand for a while. Those who have comfortable seats are pierced by their own hard heart, and they pity and relent. A small space is found for the man who stands. They naturally soon after fall to conversation. They discover soon their mutual friends and relations, and by the time they leave the train they become the most affectionate of people, and the parting becomes a sorrow. Whereby was this mutual hate turned into love? It is by knowledge. We are ignorant, all of us, how inanimately we are related to each other. We are all God's servants, his children in fact, and maybe we can share in his fellowship. The whole world is ensouled by him. We are members of his body, says Srikantha. The true worship. Wherefore the whole universe is ensouled by Shiva. If any embodied being whatsoever be subjected to constraint, it will be quite repugnant to the eight-bodied Lord. As to this there is no doubt. Doing good to all, kindness to all, affording shelter to all, and this they hold as the worshipping of Shiva. Here in this last sentence of Srikantha do we get at the real essence of all religion. What is Shiva? It is love. What is worship of him? Loving him. How can we love him, whom we do not know? Nay, we can know him, and do know him, though. We do not perceive each other's souls or minds, and yet we love each other. It is the body we know, and it is on each other's body we manifest all our love. We do willing service to the body only of our elders, masters, teachers, and parents. It is on that body we love, we lavish all our wealth and labor. So can we worship and love him by loving his body, which is the whole universe of Chaitanya and Achetana. Thou dwellest in all the elements, 'tis said, and yet thou goest not nor comest. The sages thus have sung their rhythmic songs, though neither have we heard nor learnt of those that thee by seeing of the eye have known. Thou king of Perunturi, girt with cool rice fields, to ponder thee is hard to human thought. To us in presence come, cut off our ills, in mercy make us thine. Our mighty Lord, from off thy couch in grace arise. As I pointed out above, knowledge is an essential requisite of our love. As knowledge grows, love will grow. The more and more we understand our nearness to each other and to God, more and more will our love grow. The knowledge and love prevailing between master and servant is weaker than between father and son. Between friends it is higher, and in the case of lovers it is highest. The third possibility. I must here point out a psychological law which I may state as the basis of this experience, and which I may state as the third possibility. It is the peculiar nature of the soul or mind whereby it identifies itself with the thing it is united to. This aspect is alone fully discussed in the Siddhanta Shastras. Saint Mekandar comments upon it in the commentaries, and Saint Tayamanavar paraphrases it. The human soul is a mirror, a crystal. It becomes dark when darkness covers it. A man can be judged by his associates. He can be good or bad as his associates are. With the world in union, the soul has become identified with the world and lost its individuality. In God it has become Shivam, losing its individuality. In the full glare of midday sun, I challenge one to see the mirror. What one will see, if he has courage enough to see it, will be the full radiance of the glorious sun, which will blind him at once. Says Professor Henry Drummond, all men are mirrors. That is the first law on which this formula is based. One of the aptest descriptions of a human being is a mirror. Professor Drummond states this law as the law of reflection and assimilation, or law of influence, or law of identity, as we may call it. He instances the iron which gets magnetized and becomes a magnet. A mirror getting rid of its dust reflects the glorious light and becomes merged with it and lost. How the soul merges and loses itself. Only one word about the meaning of the words merging and losing before I continue the thread. I quote from a textbook of science. When a river enters the sea, it soon loses its individuality. It becomes merged in the body of the ocean, when it loses its current, and when therefore it has no power to keep in suspension the sediment which it had brought down from the higher lands. Please reread the lines in this way, and the application will become clear. When the soul loses its individuality, its feeling of I and mine, ahankaram or anavam, it becomes merged in God when it loses its karma, and when therefore it has no power to keep in suspension its mala with which it was associated from the beginning. This losing of self is the real sacrifice brought about by love. It is this sacrifice we are asked to make as we enter the temple precincts, and the moment we make it, our will leaves us and we will become the blissful Shivam. We liken the soul to the mirror, and the following passages from the Upanishads may be considered. As a metal disc mirror tarnished by dust shines bright again after it has been cleaned, so is the one incarnate person satisfied and freed from grief after he has seen the real nature of himself. And when by the real nature of himself he sees as by a lamp the real nature of the Brahman, then having known the unborn eternal God who transcends all tattvas, he is freed from all pasha. From meditating on him, from joining him, from becoming one with him, there is further cessation of all maya in the end. In Drummond's language, these verses read, see God, reflect God, and become God. Students of Darwin will have noted how powerful is the law of association and assimilation, or identity, in the animal and human evolution. Persons who are ever associated with pigs get piggy faces, and with horses, horsey faces. In the case of a husband and wife, when they have been perfectly loving, it has been found to effect a complete assimilation of their facial features. Such is the power of the human mind. It can lower itself to the very depths of the brute, or it can raise itself to the very height of godhood. This law is spoken of in our textbooks as the law of Garudadyanam. This brings us to the very end of our subject. We cannot know God really by all our religious rites and performances, repetition of prayers and formulas by saguna or nirguna worship, with or without idols, and even by the highest yoga, except when His grace and love fills us all, and we lose ourselves in this love. Look at how St. Makandar ridicules this idea of the yogi that he knows God. If it can be meditated, then as an object of our senses it becomes asat. If you regard it as not conceivable by our organs, internal and external, even then it is of no use. If you contemplate it as beyond contemplation even, then it gives you no benefit, as it is a mere fiction. If you contemplate it as yourself, this is also fiction. Giving up these fictitious ideas of God, the only way to know Him is by understanding with His aral or grace. The four paths. So with that, all our understanding of Him till the final goal is reached will be merely fictitious, or, to use a better word, symbolical. The conception as to whether that of the Bhakta or Yogi, Hindu or Christian, will only be symbolical. We introduce a real element into it when we introduce love in our conception of God, and this conception naturally divides itself into four forms, that of master and servant, parent and child, friend, and lover and loved. All other conceptions can be reduced into these four. There is love and knowledge in all these different forms of bhavana or sadhana. As our Lord and Master, we do Him and His bhaktas loving service and obedience and reverence. In the Master we lose our own identity. To the Father and Mother, obedience and service and reverence and love in a greater degree is exhibited. To the friend we can say, I am he is myself, all mine are his, and all his are mine. In real life, this ideal of friendship is rarely manifested. Our people could hardly appreciate the fact of the saint who gave his wife to the bhakta who demanded her of him. How would you like the portrayal of Hall Caine, of the lowborn and illiterate Manxman who loved and continued to love more and more the highborn and cultured aristocrat who betrayed him, cheated and robbed him of his betrothed, and forfeited all claims to regard and respect? It was because his friendship on his own part was sincere and true. It is this ideal of the friendship and the bhavana required under it which reveals the meaning of the formulas of Tattvamasi and Aham Brahmasmi, given out as the mantras to be practiced by the yogi. In yoga, the identity of bhavana is fully reached. When we understand this fully, we can understand all the episodes in the life of Saint Sundara, who was of the very image of Somasundara, and whom God chose as his own friend. He, the seven notes, their joy, the sweet ambrosia, my very friend, who is with me even in my mischiefs, my Lord who gave me my beautiful-eyed Paravai, my Lord of Arur, how can I, the poor fool, be separated from him? In life have you felt the 100th part of this love for your friend, the gnawing pain at heart when you were separated, and the boundless joy when you met? These are then the four paths or margas, Charya, Kriya, Yoga, and Jnana, otherwise called Dasha, Satputra, and Saha and Sanmarga, and the various duties assigned under each are only such as our love of the Master, or Father, or Friend, or Lover will induce us to manifest in tokens of our love. These duties are meaningless except as tokens of our love and as disciplining us to love, and love more God and His creatures. Even though with bones for firewood the flesh is torn to lines and burnt like gold in fire, except to those who internally melt themselves into love, God is not accessible. These duties are for the Dasamargi. The easy duties, lighting lamps, culling flowers, sweeping and washing the temple, praising God, and assisting in his service of Abhisheka, and cooking food constitute Dashamarga. Our Christian friends who regard our building temples and spending in ornaments and flowers will scarcely realize why millions of money are spent on churches and church decorations. The money spent in flowers on Easter and Christmas festivities in church comes to 1 million or more each year. Christ rebuked the man who held the joint purse and who objected to Mary's wasting that precious scented oil on Christ's feet. It was not the value of the oil that was worth anything, but the love that prompted that sacrifice was worth all. But it is not by costly gifts alone we can manifest our love. The duties of Satpura Margi are as follows. Puja, reading, reciting prayers, japa, true tapas, and truth, purity, loving, offering food, constitute Satpura Marga. Purifying oneself by Adara and Nadisodhana, and becoming possessed of 18 Shaktis, and entering the temple of Jnanakasha, Chidambaram, and getting rid of one's senses and mind is Sahamarga. The 8 forms of yoga referred to are Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyakara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi, and we note only here the definition of Yama and Niyama. Yama is ahimsa, satyam, refraining from theft, celibacy or chastity, mercifulness, devoid of deceitfulness, contentedness, courage, taking little food and purity. Niyama is performing tapas, japam, and vratam, believing in God, worshipping Him, reading and meditating on the Shastras, being cheerful, fearful of evil, and intelligent. The duties of Sanmarga are stated as follows. Getting rid of one's Pashutvam and Pasha, becoming one with Pati, melting the heart which never melts in love, entering the true presence which one can never know, and standing steadfast there are Sanmarga. These 4 sadhanas are so arranged that one may lead into the other, and the forms and symbols in each are so chosen that, as one reaches the higher path, fresh meaning and fresh beauty and life burst forth, as his own intelligence and love ripen to receive the fresh life. The temple built of brick and mortar becomes the very soul and heart of the yogi, and the Shiva Linga becomes the loving presence and light of the Supreme. The food offered by the devotee gradually comes to mean the sacrifice of a nava. The beauty of such books as Tiravachaka, Devara, and Tiruvimale consists in this, that it furnishes the required mental and spiritual food to the illiterate and the most cultured minds. That these 4 paths are natural divisions, it will be readily perceived. The world's great religions may be ranged under one or other of these heads. Mohammedanism and the ancient Judaism fall under the first division. It was the merit of Jesus Christ that he brought into greater prominence the fatherhood of God. The following quotations from the Bible will show that the other parts are not unrecognized by Jesus Christ. Ye call me Master and Lord, and ye say well, for so I am. St. John 13:13. Little children, yet a while I am with you. A new commandment I give you, that ye love one another, as I have loved you, that ye also love one another. John 13:33 and 34. If ye love me, keep my commandments. St. John 14:15. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. St. John 15:13. Ye are my friends, if ye do whatsoever I command you. St. John 15:14. Henceforth I call you not servants, for the servant knoweth not what the master doeth. But I have called you friends, for all things that I have heard of my Father I have made known unto you. St. John 15:15. Ye have not chosen me, but I have chosen you. St. John 15:16. That they all may be one, as thou, Father, art in me, and I in thee, that they also may be one in us. St. John 17:21. I in them, and thou in me, that they may be made perfect in one. St. John 17:23. When I spoke of these higher aspects of Christ's teaching to a missionary, he observed to me that it only struck him lately that fellowship with God was a higher spiritual condition than fatherhood of God. Among ourselves, the Madhva system may be said to be pure Dashamarga. The Ramanuja, in its popular aspects, is Dashamarga and Satpura Marga, and a little more. Shankara's system will be Sahamarga, but the mistake is made in not understanding that these truths are only symbolic, and then they are apt to become dogmatic. I have seen Christian friends contend that God is our real Father, as Vedantins and yogis may declaim that there is no other God but the Self. A true and universal religion will combine all these various paths, which are required and necessitated by the varying degrees of man's intellectual and spiritual development. And then we will not see the mote in our brother's eye, and will live in peace and amity forever. I only need quote to you one verse from the Gita, where all these four paths are set forth. Therefore, with bowing and body bent, I ask grace of thee, Lord and adorable, as father to son, as friend to friend. It is meet, O Lord, to bear with me as lover to loved. I may also observe that Shaivism of today, which I regard as the true modern representative of the historic religion of the Gita and the Mahabharata period, combines all these four paths, and its great saints Apar, Jnanasambandar, Sundarar, and Madhukavachagar are regarded as teachers of these four paths. More than all this, I wish to emphasize the fact that love is the essence of all real religion, and real worship of God is the worship of God's creatures, and loving them one and all without distinction of caste or creed, as observed by Srikanta, and unless this is fully recognized and practiced, no real spiritual progress is possible. The personality of God, according to the Shaiva Siddhanta. It will be interesting to note that it was about 12 years ago we brought out our first work in English on the Shaiva Siddhanta philosophy from Tirupatur, and we have continued ever since to work hard at it, and our translations of Shivajnana Bodham, Shivajnana Siddhyar, Tiruvarutpayan, along with our contributions to the Siddhanta Dipika during the last 10 years, and Dr. G. U. Pope's Tiruvachagam, form the only bibliography on the subject in English, and we are glad to note that within the last few years, considerable interest in the subject has been awakened, and several European missionaries have made a special study of the subject, and have discussed it before missionary societies and in the public press. We quote the latest opinion from the Christian College Magazine, Volume 20, Issue 9, from the pen of Reverend W. Gowdy. There is no school of thought and no system of faith or worship that have come to us with anything like the claims of the Shaiva Siddhanta. This system possesses the merits of great antiquity. In the religious world, the Shaiva system is heir to all that is most ancient in South India. It is a religion of the Tamil people, by the side of which every other form is of comparatively foreign origin. In the largeness of its following, as well as in regard to the antiquity of some of its elements, the Shaiva Siddhanta is beyond any other form the religion of the Tamil people, and ought to be studied by all Tamil missionaries. We have, however, left the greatest distinction of this system till the last. As a system of religious thought, as an expression of faith and life, the Shaiva Siddhanta is by far the best that South India possesses. Indeed, it would not be rash to include the whole of India, and to maintain that, judged by its intrinsic merits, the Shaiva Siddhanta represents the high watermark of Indian thought and Indian life, apart, of course, from the influences of Christian evangel. And we had remarked in our introduction to Tiruvarutpayan, or Light of Grace, and there can be no doubt that we have in these works the brightest and largest gems, picked out from the diamond mines of the Sanskrit Vedantic works, washed and polished and arranged in the most beautiful and symmetrical way in the diadem of Indian thought. Through want of active propaganda, by means of lectures and conferences, the subject is not properly brought to the notice of the English-educated public, and appreciated by them as it deserves to be, and we are therefore much obliged to the editor for having allowed us to contribute a paper on the subject. Despite the opinion of a few European and Indian scholars who would trace Shaiva Siddhanta to a purely South Indian source, we have all along been holding that Shaiva Siddhanta is nothing but the ancient Hinduism in its purest and noblest aspects, and it is not a new religion nor a new philosophy, and it can be traced from the earliest Vedas and Upanishads. We do not hear of anyone introducing Shaivism at any time into India, and the majority of Hindus have remained remain Shaivites from before the days of the Mahabharata. The ideal of the highest god has, from the beginning, been centered round the person of Rudra or Shiva, and in the Rig Veda we find him described as the lord of sacrifices and prayers. And we find this maintained in the days of Valmiki, when beliefs in other deities were slowly gaining ground. Consistently with this position in the Rig Veda, the Yajurveda declares that there is only one Rudra. They don't allow a second. Eka eva Rudro, nadvitiyaya taste, Kanda 8, 6, 10. He who is one is called Rudra. Ya eko Rudra uchyati, and Saint Tirumalar declares accordingly, the only one is he, the second is his sweet grace, Shakti. He stood in the three, he uttered the four, dharmas, he conquered the five, senses, he spread himself out as the six, adaras, he stood transcendent as the seventh, knowing the eighth. Soham is Vedanta, one only without a second is Siddhanta. In the imperishable Turiya, after seeing the self, Atmadarshan, thou unitest with the Parabrahman in Shiva Yoga. Thou canst attain the rare Siddhi, losing Mala. God is only one. Siddhanta declares there is God alone without a second. The first mantra, it will be noted, is not so well known as the mantra Ekamedvadvityam Brahma, occurring in an Upanishad of the Samaveda, and Max Mueller has shown that the use of such words as Rudra, Hara, Shiva, to denote the highest God, is much earlier than the use of such words as Brahman, Atman, and Paramatman, and in fact, these words do not occur in the Rig Veda at all to denote the highest God. And we may also point out that the word Nadvityam, occurring in the Yajur Veda, is certainly a more ancient and original form of the word than Advityam, which has been obtained by the elision of the letter N. And Saint Mikandar comments on the mantra in the following verse. The Vedic text means there is only one supreme being without a second, and this one is the Lord. You who say there is one is the Pashu bound up in Pasha. The word secondless means that beside God nothing else will exist, as when we say that there will be no other letters, consonants, when the vowel is not. No consonant sounds can possibly be formed unless the vowel sound is uttered at the same time, and this will justify us in stating that the vowel is alone, without a second, and yet the vowel is not the consonant, nor the consonant the vowel. When we utter the consonant sound, the vowel and the consonant are linked in a peculiar, inseparable, and eternal manner. This is the link or relation between our own human body and the mind, and from analogy we say there is a similar link between God and the world, including souls, and this link or relation is called in the Shaiva Siddhanta the Advaita, and the philosophy postulating this peculiar link between God and man is called the Advaita Siddhanta philosophy. But how does the one link himself to the many, and become the many, and divide himself among the many, as it were? Saint Tirumalar postulates, he is the one, the second is his grace, Arul. This division of him is brought about because he is also grace or love. His second is his Shakti. He is one with his Shakti or love. The ignorant say, love and God are different. None know that love and God are the same. When they know that love and God are the same, they rest in God as love. And accordingly also, Saint Mikandar postulates his second sutra, in which he declares that God is one and different from the world and the souls, as he is one with his Ajna Shakti, which is all power, all intelligence, and all will, and all love. And in the last argument, he shows that as God is pure intelligence, this oneness or union with the world, or omnipresence is possible. If he was not intelligent but material or jadam, this could not be possible. As such, Shiva Jnana Bodham contains the shortest definition of God as Shiva Sat, or Chit Sat, or Sat Chit. Sat denotes God as a pure being, in which aspect he can never reach us. Chit, or Arul, or love, denotes his aspect in which he can reach us, and we can know him. Sat is the sun, which we can never comprehend. Chit is the light, one ray of which is enough to remove our darkness and enlighten us, and but for that one ray of light we can never know the sun. All other conceptions of God follow from this essential definition of God as Sat Chit, and, if true, must conform to it. If not, they must be rejected as false. From the fact that he is intelligent, it follows also that God wills and acts. The form of this Shakti is unlimited intelligence. If asked whether supreme will and power are also found in this intelligence, we answer yes. Wherever there is intelligence, there are will and power. As such, power and will also be manifested by this Chit Shakti. And he wills to create the worlds, he creates them, and resolves them, and reproduces them again and again. He could not do this purposelessly or out of his mere whim and pleasure, and as we know he is all love, he could do it only out of such love, to help to lift up the erring and ignorant souls, by giving them their bodies and senses, so that they themselves may will and act, and taste the bitter fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and be chastened and purified by suffering and sorrow, and learn to submit their will to the will of the Supreme. The Kalidasa in his Kumara Sambhava declares, "No selfish want e'er prompts a deed of mine. Do not the forms, 8 varied forms I wear, the truth of this to all the world declare." And these 8 forms he mentions in his invocation in Sakuntala. Isa, preserve you, he who is revealed in these 8 forms by man perceptible, water of all creation's works the first, the fire that bears on high the sacrifice, presented with solemnity to heaven, the priest, the holy offerer of gifts, the sun and moon, whose 2 majestic orbs, eternal marshallers of day and night, the subtle ether, vehicle of sound, diffused through the boundless universe, the earth by sages called the place of birth, of all material essences and things, and air which giveth life to all that breathe. Saint Upper has the following verse. As earth, fire, air, and Ejaman of sacrifice, as moon, the sun, and Akash, as Ashtamurti, as goodness and evil, as male and female, himself the form of every form, as yesterday and today and tomorrow, my Lord with the braided hair stands supreme. Saint Manikavachagar has the following verse. Earth, water, air, fire, sky, the sun and moon, the sentient man, these 8 forms he pervades, the 7 worlds, 10 quarters, he, the one and many, he stands so, let us sing. He pervades these 8 forms, they form his 8 bodies, and hence Shiva is called Ashtamurti. By this is established his Antaryamitvam, or omnipresence, or immanence in all nature, as he is Chit, but he is beyond all these forms, and beyond all nature and man. The famous passage in the 7th Brahmana of the 3rd chapter in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad deals with God being immanent in nature and in man. Beginning with the verse Yasha Prithvi Sarira, etc., he who dwells in the earth and within or different from the earth, whom the earth does not know, whose body Sarira the earth is, and who rules the earth within, he is thy Atma, the ruler within, the immortal, and giving similar sentiments regarding water, air, fire, etc., it ends with he who dwells in Vijnana soul, and within, or different from Vijnana, whom Vijnana does not know, whose body Vijnana is, who rules Vijnana within. He is thy Atma, the ruler within, immortal. That God is different from all nature and man is further brought out by the famous Neti Neti verse of this same Upanishad, 3.926, which Paranjoti Munivar translates and expands in the following lines. God Sundara, who is described as not this, not this. The sages declare he is not the 5 elements, not the senses, nor sensations, nor the andakaranas, nor the soul. He is the deceitful nothing, which the Vedas fail to discover. The Supreme is adored as the Creator, Hara, as Protector, Shankara, as Destroyer or Reproducer, Rudra, and as Bliss-Giver, Shiva. God is called thus as possessing 8 attributes, and they are as follows: self-dependence, purity, self-knowledge, omniscience, being ever free from sin, supreme graciousness, unlimited bliss. Then follow questions whether God should be said to possess form or no form, whether he should be regarded as saguna or nirguna, personal or impersonal, and so on. In regard to the question of form or no form, the Siddhanta is positive that God is neither rupi nor arupi, nor rupa-rupi. God is neither rupi nor arupi, neither soul nor matter. It recognizes that all rupa and arupa are forms only of matter, which is objective to our senses, and God can never be objective to us, and cannot possess any of these material forms or bodies. The nature of matter is to limit, and God is the illimitable, and can never be found by any material forms. Some would say God is arupi, not realizing that matter is also formless as air, and nothing is gained by calling him arupi. The fact to be clearly borne in mind is that God cannot be objective to us and possess material form. But if it is pointed out that Shaiva Siddhanta religion recognizes forms of God and his appearances and acts, it is answered that these forms of his are not material, but are purely spiritual forms, formed of his great love and grace, and to be perceived not by the human mind, but with the divine grace. Saint Arulnandi says, all these forms of his are assumed out of his supreme grace for destroying our evil bodies, and how this is possible is shown in the following. As he does not possess the defect of an object of perception, and as he is possessed of absolute intelligence and power, as he is not possessed of likes and dislikes, the Nirmala God can assume any form out of his grace, and these forms are described in the following verse. His form is love, his attributes and knowledge are love, his 5 functions are love, his organs like arms, feet, etc., and his ornament like the crescent moon, etc., are also love. These things are assumed by the Nirmala God, not for his own benefit, but for the benefit of mankind. With which compare the following verse from the Taittiriya Upanishad. His head is surely love, joy his right wing, delight his left. Bliss is his self, Brahman whereon he rests. The following beautiful hymn from Saint Apar and the text from the Mandukya Upanishad may also be read. The Lord with the braided hair lives in the Kanchi burial ground, with his beautiful Uma, with penciled eyebrows. He has no sin. He is not one of the mortals, and is not to be compared with any of them. He has no place, and is incomparable. We can, with his grace alone as our eye, perceive him, his form and nature. Otherwise none can paint him in his real form and nature. This Atma is not attainable by explanation, nor yet by mental grasp, nor by hearing many times. By him whom he chooses, by him is he obtained. For him God his proper form reveals. Mandukya Upanishad 3.2.3. It is to be noted also that the various forms in the temple are merely earthly symbols, necessary in our view for the ordinary human mind to grasp and follow the divine ideals, until the soul has advanced to a very high stage indeed. A missionary friend of ours wrote to say that as regards the use of symbolism, he found it necessary for the educated people, but as regards its salutary effect on the illiterate people, he felt not convinced. This opinion will be found opposed to the common current of opinion on the subject, but yet it is true in so far as it postulates the necessity of the use of symbols even as regards highly educated people. And we regard the various conceptions of God as he, she, and it, as conceptions derived from material forms, and as such not appertaining to his real essence, but the forms are necessary for our own easy conception of God. He is male, female, and neuter, earth and heaven, and none of these. Praise be to him who is female and male and neuter. Further, the words saguna and nirguna are usually translated as personal and impersonal, and we have often pointed out how vaguely and loosely these words are used, and protested against this translation. We will first consider the words saguna and nirguna. It literally means with guna and without guna. One school of people would interpret it as meaning with good qualities and without bad qualities, and that this is absurd is seen from the fact that the two words are made to mean the same thing. The word guna, however, does not mean any good or bad quality, but is a technical word as used by the Sankhya and Vedanta schools, and as occurring in the Upanishads, Gita, etc. It means the three gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas, the qualities of prakriti, or pradana, or matter, and as such the words would mean with material qualities or without material qualities. Saint Tirumalur uses the phrase Mukuna Nirgunam, so that no mistake may be made of the word Nirgunam itself. Shaiva is condition of wakefulness, Jagrata. Rajas is dream condition, Svapna. Tamas is Sushupti. The stainless Turiyam is Nirguna. So also the Gita speaks of Triguno Nirguna, and it stands to reason that God cannot be saguna, clothed in matter or material qualities, and must be therefore non-material, nirguna. The Supreme God is therefore described in the Upanishads and Gita and Shivajnana Bodham as nirguna, and not as saguna, as in the following passages. This one God is hid in every Bhuta, pervading all, the inner Atma of every Atma, inspector of all deeds, spectator, in whom everything dwells, supporter, the witness, the pure intelligence, and nirguna being, the Ishvara of Ishvaras, the Maheshvara, the God supreme of gods, the King of kings, the supreme of supreme, the Isha of the universe, Svetas, beginningless, nirguna, Paramatman, imperishable, though seated in the body, Okanteya, worketh not, nor is soiled, Gita 13:31. Note Ramanuja explains Nirguna as destitute of sattva and other qualities. Will not the Lord who is Nirguna, Nirmala, eternal happiness, Tatparam, transcending all things, and beyond comparison, appear to the soul when it gets rid of its tattvas such as Akash, etc.? Will not he appear as a far transcending wonder and an inseparable light of its understanding? Shivajnana Bodham 9:2a. But certain deities are stated to be saguna, as being clothed with pure sattva, or rajasa, or tamasa, and they should not be confounded with the Turiya Murti, or the fourth, the Chaturtha, the Supreme Brahman. These saguna beings are merely certain souls from among Shakalars, wielding very high powers and possessing still material bodies. Santam Shivam Advaitam Chaturtham, Ramatapini Upanishad. The word nirguna is the same as the word gunatita, beyond guna or matter. The word therefore implies non-material and therefore pure chit. Christian missionaries need not therefore shy at this word, and they should certainly drop the word saguna, which technically means material, from the passages quoted above, especially from the verse from Shivajnana Bodham. It will be seen that God is called nirguna, intelligence, and rationality and consciousness. That God is called nirguna, intelligence and rationality and consciousness are not denied to him. This is made further clear in the following verses from St. Makandar and St. Tirumalur. When the soul becoming one with God and feels him, he becomes the supreme bliss, as God becomes one with the soul. So understanding him, will he not know with the soul what is understood by the soul? That day I knew my God, the same was not understood by the gods. The bright effulgence lighting the inside of my soul and body, it is said, does not know. Who else can know? Of course, it is also said in these words that God cannot know, and it is pointed out by Shivajnana Swamigal in his Dravida Mahabhashya that this only means that God's consciousness is not like the consciousness of the individual man, which is limited and cannot become conscious unless it forgets and can only understand in relation. Change is essential to consciousness, Bain. This is human consciousness. God does not possess this limited consciousness. His consciousness is what transcends all limitation and all relation, and is absolute, as in his Akandakara. There is no distinction of this and that. There is nothing out of him. Coming to the question of God being personal or impersonal, we are not quite sure in what sense our Indian writers use these words, but they mostly take it as meaning saguna and nirguna. There is some difference of opinion as regards the connotation of the words among European writers. Some use it as implying individuality and limitation. Others use it as not meaning individuality. And this is the more prevalent and cultured opinion. We take the following definitions from a vocabulary of philosophy. Person, a being intelligent and free, every spiritual and moral agent, every cause which is in possession of responsibility and consciousness is a person. In this sense, God, considered as a creating cause, is a person. The intimate relation of God as being to all his attributes and to all his essence constitutes the divine personality, which for God is his entire being. God only exists for himself in a manner infinite and absolute. God has relation entirely to himself, for there is no being out of him to which he can have relation. His whole essence is for himself, and this relation is altogether internal. The divine consciousness or personality embraces all that is in God, all of which he is the reason. Person, as applied to deity, expresses the definite and certain truth that God is a living being and not a dead material energy. Emerson says that personality signifies true being, sat, both concrete and spiritual. It alone is original being. It is not limited. It is that universal element that pervades every human soul, and which is at once its continent and fount of being. Distinction from others and limitation by them results from individuality, ahankara or anava, not personality, sat. Personality pertains to the substance of the soul, and individuality to its form. Another Christian writer, Reverend J. Iverach, points out that the absolute and unconditioned being is personal, is not a contradiction in terms, such as a round square, but that it will be true as when we say a white or crimson square. When we speak of the absolute, we speak of it as a predicate of pure being. We simply mean that the absolute personal being is and must be self-conscious, rational, and ethical, must answer to the idea of spirit. Why may not the absolute being be self-conscious? To deny this to him would be to deny to him one of the perfections which even finite beings can possess. Saint Mikandar and Saint Tirumular had stated the same question long ago, as we had shown. The self-consciousness, as we have shown above, is not to be confounded with the limited of the soul. As it is, personality clearly means sat and chit, and neither saguna nor nirguna. Personality is opposed to achit or jada or irrational matter and relates to the substance saguna and nirguna, to the form, either as individual or otherwise. God can never become individualized as a man, woman, or brute. The limitation of the latter class of beings arises from its union with matter or guna, saguna.